What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods coming back at you with another episode, continuing our Big 10 in 31 days theme. We're joined by Aaron Breitman, who is a Rutgers insider and the managing editor for On the Banks, which is SB Nation's site for Rutgers sports. I just wanted to say I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Zach. Look forward to talking.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and start with this past season. It was a 3-6 season, but three of those losses were games that Rutgers had a real chance of winning one-score games, especially that triple overtime game against Michigan. Did this season exceed, meet, or fall short of your preseason expectations?
Oh, it definitely blew away expectations. Obviously there's high hopes for Greg Schiano long term, but just based on where the program was at when he inherited it, having to go through the global pandemic where they didn't have they didn't have spring practice at all. They're away from campus for a few months. Brand new coaching staff, 11th new offensive coordinator in 11 years. There was just so many moving parts that it was really unfair, really, to have high expectations going into the season. And for them to win 3 games, for them to be competitive, much more competitive against better teams as well. Even Ohio State, they hung in there and played really well at the end. So market progress throughout the year. Obviously, some people look at those 3 close losses as games they should have won. But really, if you think about it, just the fact that they were there was huge progress, and certainly encouraging signs. I think not only is Schiano bringing in a significant upgrade in talent, but just to see what he did with a lot of the existing players on the roster and making them better, I think is really a huge sign in terms of how strong player development will be. That was the calling card of his first tenure. And it was great to see it on full display, especially after the previous era. Really, that aspect of the program was severely lacking.
Right. And you mentioned, we didn't even know we were going to have a season, no preseason, no fall camp really. On August 11th, Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, made the decision to postpone the season after releasing a full in-conference schedule that he put a lot of work into. Was Rutgers one of the teams behind the scenes that we saw with Nebraska and Ohio State fighting back against this decision? And what was the actual plan for Rutgers if Kevin Warren does not rescind his initial decision?
Well, back in that time, Rutgers actually they had to have a pause because they did have a COVID outbreak within the program. So they had roughly 3 dozen people in the program, both players and staff, right around that time. So it was the last week of July, first week of August. So I believe when the Big Ten made that announcement that they were postponing the season, it literally came maybe 2 days after they were out of quarantine. So they were a little bit behind the ball in terms of getting ready for fall camp. But I know that there was certainly disappointment in that decision, and Rutgers was certainly excited about playing. So I think it took everybody by surprise, especially like you said, it was pretty bizarre to release the schedule and then less than a week later or a week later, postpone it like that. I think, it's a blessing that they ended up having the season they did. Rutgers was, I believe, one of 2 schools in the Big Ten that actually played all 9 games, which is a credit to Coach Schiano and Rutgers and how they managed that. And I think that they actually, learned lessons from what happened in the summer, and it helped them get through the whole season. They really isolated themselves, and they were able to get through it. So, it was a very weird. I mean, it's been such a weird year, in real life, but also with sports. And I think the way the Big Ten football season went was certainly odd. And I think Schiano talked about the challenge of having training camp during the school year. Especially for a first year staff. They didn't have as much time with the players as they normally would have had in an August training camp. So that was a factor too. But as we saw, it really, it didn't set them back per se because they hit the ground running in game 1, and it really set the tone. That win over Michigan State set the tone for the whole season.
Right. I mean, that win over Michigan State was one of the shocks of the year. I don't think anyone was predicting Rutgers to win that game in the preseason. I jumped on board. I picked you guys to win the second game too. It didn't work out. We covered that on the podcast, but the QB position's one that's very interesting for Rutgers. I mean, it's been, like, to say it lightly, it's been a rough stretch at the quarterback position for a few years. But I saw some promise out of Noah Vedral this year. Do you think he's the answer for the Scarlet Knights, or do you think there's another name that could emerge at the QB1 position?
I think right now he's the answer. I think he certainly brings a lot of positives. I think he's intelligent. He understands the offense that offensive coordinator Sean Gleason's running. Very similar to when he's a transfer from Nebraska, so he played for Scott Frost. So he's got familiarity there. I think he's a really hard worker. I think that the fact that he is mobile helps. I think his arm strength and his ability to make certain throws is limited. And I think we saw that this year. He had some games where he had some bad interceptions, bad decisions, but he leaves it all out on the field. I think that the players have confidence in him. I think he's a good leader, and I think for where the program is right now, I think they need a guy like him. Certainly, I think it's a position they need to upgrade in the near future, and I think Rutgers has done a really good job with the transfer market, and you may see another guy come in this season or after that. But I know they're recruiting really hard for 22 as well. Yeah, I think for right now, where they at and where they've been at that position, I think Rutgers fans should be pretty happy with what they have with Vedral.
Right. And you talk about recruiting ramping up. I got to give credit to Greg Schiano for that. He's entering his second stint at Rutgers. His first stint ended in 2011. He had that almost perfect 2006 season where Rutgers was a top 10 team pretty much all year. Why does Schiano seem to have so much success at this university with this program? And what does he mean to the university and the fan base as a whole?
Well, it's might sound cliche, but he's a hometown guy. He's a New Jersey guy. He understands the landscape. He has great relationships with the high school football coaches. New Jersey is kind of a different state in terms of it's one of the best high school football states in the country, but it's one of those where everyone's traditionally left for all the big name schools. Obviously, a lot of Big-10 schools, Notre Dame, some of the ACC schools. So it's a weird state where most of the best high school states in the country, if those schools are recruiting out of that base, they're really good schools. They're having really good a lot of success. Where Rutgers has never been able to tap into that other than with Schiano, and it took him time that first tenure. And I think what you're seeing now is his credibility and the confidence in him to do what he did the first time. This go around, he's been able to hit the ground running a lot faster on the recruiting trail. I think his tenure at Ohio State. I mean, he won Recruiter of the Year at Ohio State, and I think some people just kind of assumed it's because he's at Ohio State. But he's always been. We've known him always as a great recruiter, and I think he came back to Rutgers with almost a little bit more. I guess maybe credibility just because of how he did it at Ohio State so well. So I think that it's been a huge key. And I think what you're seeing now, too, is it's not just the success he's having in New Jersey. He's going to Florida again. He's going to Ohio. He's getting, four-star guys outside of the state, which is obviously huge. And I think, Rutgers obviously being in the Big-10 this time versus being in the Big East his first go-around helps as well. And I think he's able to sell a vision. And I think that you look at the long list of players he's developed and gone to the NFL from Rutgers really speaks for itself. And I think that he does a really good job of tying that community together in the program and having those NFL guys reach out and just explain how much he helped them there. And I think. The fact that there was obviously it's early, it's March, but the fact that they're number 10 in the country with recruiting class, it's pretty remarkable. Obviously, it's not going to stay that way, but he's proven if he can recruit in the top 30 year after year, I think they're going to be a middle of the pack Big-10 team year after year. And to be honest, I mean, with where they've been, for now, I think you'd be crazy not to want and take that.
Right. And, I want to talk about kind of a situation like, I mean, you cover Rutgers, Greg Schiano better than any of us. I mean, we're kind of an SEC based podcast. Me and my co host, who's off right now, are both from Alabama, Louisiana area. So a lot of our listeners are down south. We all remember the Tennessee Greg Schiano scandal where he was hired, they protested, they didn't want him. In terms of just what he brings as a coach, how big of a loss was that? And just being a hometown guy, what was Rutgers' kind of reaction to seeing Greg Schiano almost having like his first prime SEC job and just kind of being tossed to the side like that?
It was bizarre. I think the Rutgers fan base thought it was crazy. He's proven to be he held the program to a high level of integrity. Academically, Rutgers football never did better than they did under Schiano. The level of community service they did, and just being out there and representing the university well. I mean, as soon as Schiano left, a lot of scandals happened with his predecessor. The academically they did not do nearly as well. So we saw the drop off we had at Rutgers once Schiano left. So to hear his integrity getting questioned, and about something that no one knew for sure and happened 30 years ago. And I mean, listen, the dynamics of it's not like Greg Schiano was head coach at Penn State when he was overseeing potentially whatever happened. He was a graduate assistant. So it
Right.
just seemed like there was, reaching for, grasping for straws there for a reason they didn't like Schiano just as a coach. And, I think that, unfortunately for them, I think they made the wrong decision. I think, they didn't go with Schiano. They went with Pruitt. That didn't work out. And, Rutgers fans are certainly thrilled that they went that way because, we're thrilled to have him back, and I think he's showing that he's. I do think he is a better fit for Rutgers than he would have been for Tennessee. But at the same time, I think that he. I think he's learned a lot, and I think he would have done well there. But like I said, we're certainly happy they made the mistake that they did.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say that decision looks worse and worse by the day, especially with what we just saw happen down there. But let's go to National Signing Day that wrapped up last month. You were talking about the recruiting uptick, the 41st ranked class in the country, according to 247 Composite. It was loaded with a lot of promising players, of promising transfers. What positions, like in your opinion, were the top priority this cycle, and which potential players could make an immediate impact for the Scarlet Knights?
Well, for Rutgers, I mean, they really need to upgrade on the line on both ends, both sides of the ball. Offensive line has been, really probably the worst position group they've had in the Big 10, and they certainly needed to upgrade there. The 2021 class, I think they did a decent job of doing. But the real, I think what you're going to see under Schiano is the defense, obviously, and in linebacker specifically, he got a 4-star linebacker, Kyrie Banton, who I think is going to be outstanding. Elijah Clark out of Camden, South Jersey is an area Rutgers has struggled to recruit in. They have an assistant named Fran Brown, who used to be at Baylor and Temple under Matt Rule. And he's now under Schiano. He's done wonders recruiting wise. He's also a great position coach. So you got 2 4-star guys in that class that I think are going to make a big impact. And he's really just getting athletes. He's not worrying as much about the individual rankings. He's just going for fit. And I think that that's always he's learned that's what works best. The McCourty brothers that have had long NFL careers. They were 2-star recruits. So he developed, and those guys are in the NFL over a decade later. So he's never been one to get caught up in the rankings, but certainly in the Big 10, you need the horses. You need guys that have that star rating to a degree. But I think his real strength is being able to find those 3-star gems that aren't maybe necessarily the highest recruited, but certainly are able to be developed and become huge contributors. So I think offensive line, defensive line is something they really need to improve on. But I think that those 2 guys right there, Banton and Clark, can certainly contribute right away. Another guy, Carnell Davis, out of Florida as a receiver. I'm really excited about him. He's a great athlete. I think he could play right away. I mean, really, I think a great selling point for him right now is he can tell anyone, you can come here and pretty much play right away. He's always been willing to play freshmen on special teams, especially. And I think right now the talent level, there's opportunity there to play right away. So he had a couple of freshmen play this past year. Malaki Melton, played pretty considerably. So I think that it's an easy selling point in that sense of the right fits. Can have an opportunity, but also the high star guys, they're going to have a chance to play right away.
Right, and there's one transfer in particular I really want to talk about. I'm currently at K-State now. Josh Youngblood heading to Rutgers. I mean, he's a hyper athletic kid. He was the Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year here at K-State, and he was probably the most popular player on the team as a freshman just because of what he could do. I mean, he was drawing comparisons to Devin Hester with what he could do on special teams. What do you see him contributing, and how big of a need was it to get an explosive kid like that?
Well, it's pretty wild because they the year before they got Aaron Cruikshank from Wisconsin, who was the Big-10 All Returner of the Year, and he ran back a touchdown off a kickoff against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. So he had an amazing year last year. He had 2 returns, and so now that you're going to have Youngblood and Cruikshank in the return game, I mean it's kind of a dream team. Youngblood had a connection with Schiano. He actually went to the high school where Schiano's kids went in Florida, where Schiano was even a volunteer assistant for a while. So you had that connection there, and I think that was obviously huge in getting him to come to Rutgers. So I think, listen, for Rutgers, they need talent, they need speed, they need athletes. And Cruikshank's the guy at Wisconsin that really didn't sniff the offensive side of the ball. He was only on special teams, where he was a big factor for Rutgers on offense last year. And I think his experience was a great selling point to Youngblood that, hey, you can do the same as well, because I know he didn't get as many touches offensively at Kansas State. So I think they're just stockpiling athletes and guys with talent and speed, which is what they desperately need. So I think we spoke to Adam Shearer, the special teams coach, last week, and he was super excited. And I think that having both of those guys on the return team is going to be unbelievable. And I think also, like I said, I think the wide receiver position just got better as well.
Right. And looking at 2022, you mentioned a top 10 class right now, 3 top 500 recruits. I mean, as we approach the spring and summer months, who are the biggest targets for this 2022 cycle, and how have they started so strong?
Well, I think that they have they know how to manage. They've adapted to recruiting during COVID. To be honest with you, I think that they haven't really missed a beat. They're getting out of state kids to commit that haven't even been to campus. Obviously, there's maybe a little bit of a concern in that once things clear up, they might not actually come. But I think that the guys they're going after are pretty solid. Anthony Johnson's a 4-star guy out of Philadelphia that they just got. They have some local kids, but they're really going after line. They got 3 offensive linemen to start off the class, and they lined it up where they committed day after day after day, all in a row. So I think that you're seeing some sophistication in how they're. Schiano's never been one to just go after one recruit. He's very big on selling the group together. Back during his first tenure, there's a famous story about how he got all the top New Jersey recruits in the room. He put them around a table and he left the room. And he said, if you guys all come here together, you're going to make Rutgers one of the best teams in the country. And I think that is a big way that he's selling things now. And I think he's getting other top recruits to buy in with each other. So the fact that he had, 3 or 4 offensive line recruits commit day after day, it sent a statement that I think it also sent a statement to other offensive players that were recruiting that, hey, this is our position of need. We're addressing it. We have these guys coming in for sure. Now it's time for you guys to come. So obviously quarterback is one of those things they really need to, lock down. They need a top 22 quarterback for sure. And I think you're seeing also that there's a shift. In Schiano's first tenure, it was much more pro style. Now they're doing, dual threat quarterback. Right now they're after a guy, Gavin Wimsett, a 4-star recruit from the South in Kentucky. And I think they have a really good shot to get him. He's a top 100 recruit. And he's the type of guy that I think if you get him, it's a real game changer. Like I said, they're they want the offense loaded with athletes, and I think getting that true dual threat quarterback to run the spread is what they need long term. So I think of the 2022 class, it started off great, but I think for this staff, they really need to find their quarterback of the future in this class.
Right. And, there's a lot of young kids on this team. This team is going to be pretty young next year. Who next year to the 2021 season do you think are really going to shine and possibly have their breakout season?
Well, I think that you still have a lot of veterans coming back next year. This extra year of eligibility has really helped. I think, especially on offense side of the ball, they have a lot of guys coming back. With Bo Melton, who's going to be a fifth-year senior. You have Isaiah Pacheco at running back. We mentioned Vedral on the offensive line. I think there's certainly going to be opportunity. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think we saw some young guys start to break out. Mohamed Toure is a young guy that was under recruited, that had a kind of a showed flashes. I think he could come back even better this coming year and be their best pass rusher. Malaki Melton's a guy I mentioned in the secondary that I think is going to be a big time contributor. So I think that there's certainly going to be opportunity, but I think in Rutgers' benefit, even on the defensive side of the ball, Tyshawn Fogg, Olakunle Fadokazi, who's was one of the best linebackers in college football this year. All these guys are coming back, so I think it's a benefit. But like you said, I think they do need to work these younger guys in. But I think it gives them an opportunity to work their way in without basically thrown into the fire, which, to be honest with you, was kind of the formula at Rutgers for a long time. Not by choice, but out of necessity. So I think the fact that part of developing a program is being able to rely on veteran guys to teach these younger guys. And I think, Toure and Melton on the defensive side are certainly two that are going to benefit from that.
Right. And, you talk about all these breakout players. We know the uptick that Rutgers is having right now. The schedule looks pretty manageable. There are some difficult games. You look at the Northwestern, Indiana, the Ohio States that are all probably top 15 programs right now. What do you think the ceiling and or floor could be for the 2021 Rutgers football team?
Well, it's interesting. I honestly think that they might not necessarily exceed their win total in the Big 10 next year, but I think that they could still make progress, if that makes sense. I think that there's certain areas that they certainly need to improve on. I think offensively, they weren't very consistent. They relied a lot on trick plays, so to speak. So I think that offensively they could get even better, but might not necessarily win more games. I think defensively, they need to certainly improve as well. I think, like you said, that schedule is brutal. Depending on how the non-conference shakes out, I think they could win 4 games, maybe 5. Maybe people would be disappointed with that after a great first year, but for me, I think that would still be forward progress. And I think even if even if they won just 2 Big 10 games, I think it's for Rutgers. It's how are they doing against the top teams? If they're more competitive year after year. Obviously, Michigan had a down year last year, but the way they played them, Michigan still had 4-star, 5-star talent on that roster. So for an undermanned Rutgers team to take them as far as they did was a huge sign, positive sign. So I think that there's a lot of room to grow. I think that you might not, like I said, it might not translate into wins and losses per se, but I think that they certainly have the opportunity to improve. But could they get to 6-6? Sure, they could. I think they would need everything to break their way. I think this past year they had a lot of good things break their way, which I don't necessarily think will happen next year. So, like I said, I think realistically my number would probably be 4-8, with the potential. I'd say a swing game either way is where I would put them right now.
Yeah, I mean that's a like you said, that's a step forward, and I think with the way Schiano's recruiting, we could get to those bowl games very soon, possibly by 2022 season. But I want to shift to the environment of Piscataway, about what makes this town, the SHI Stadium, a unique environment on game days. What separates Rutgers game day environment from others around the country?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the last few years, it was probably the lack of enthusiasm during the Chris Ash era, to be honest with you. But what Schiano made it become, during his first tenure, and then even after he left, um, was hope and excitement, and buzz where they were selling the stadium out. I mean, even those, first couple years after he left. I mean, they had Arkansas in, I think it was 2013, and that was a day game, and I mean it was rocking. It certainly has the potential to be that. I think that people have bought in. I think after this post COVID, I think people will be even more hungry to want to go to games, and after this season they had. So I think he'll get the game day experience pretty close to back to where it was. Obviously, Rutgers, there's a certain amount of tradition being the first football program in college football. So that there's some pageantry involved in terms of the walk that the players do into the stadium. There's definitely some enthusiasm towards those types of traditions, and but I think that people have always tailgated really hard at Rutgers, but it's a matter of whether they go into the games, to be honest. And I think now people will want to go to the games again, which wasn't the case the last few years. So, but I think people, like you touched on it before, but people believe in Schiano. I think, and the fact that I think every state probably appreciates their own, but I think there's a lot of New Jersey pride, and I think with Schiano and being kind of we look at him as, I think he's put on a pedestal, right or wrong, but I don't think he's the only guy that could succeed at Rutgers, but he's been the only guy that succeeded at Rutgers. So because of that, he certainly gets a big boost in terms of credibility, but also I think benefit of the doubt. And I think he's a great motivator, and I think he motivates fans and supporters too. And I think people believe in him, and I think they will come back in droves once fans can come back.
Right. I mean, and I'm not tuned in to really like the fan base consensus here. I mean, do fans like around Rutgers consider Schiano like the greatest head coach in Rutgers history, or on his way, or they want to see him do like something more? I mean, that 2000, I believe, six season had to be by far just the most exciting season to cover for Rutgers football. I mean, what is your opinion? And what's kind of like the tone of the fan base with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was when the idea that Schiano could come back this time, fans were hugely supportive of it, and basically revolted when it was reported that talks were off, and that they were going to go in another direction, and basically created this tidal wave of support. Raised, I know it's not maybe huge money, but for a grassroots campaign to raise over $400,000 in a matter of a couple of days, saying that this will be donated if you hire Schiano, for Rutgers was a really big deal. So I think that the fan base is fully behind him. I think, like I said, I think there's other guys potentially they could have brought in, but I do think that no one could have hit the ground running as fast as Schiano has, since his return, just based on what he did the first time around. And like I said, his relationship with New Jersey high school football coaches, and his credibility with the fans. So I think it was absolutely the right decision. I think that I think he's learned a lot going away and going to other places, and I think he's going to be here for a long time. I think he understands. I think he's someone that does look at his legacy and what it will be, and I think he has an appreciation for it, and knows that if he stays at Rutgers another 10, 15 years and brings them into relevancy in the Big-10, and maybe even competes for a division title, and wins one, I mean, he'll be a conquering hero forever. So whether he's the greatest coach in history, I mean, we had Frank Burns back in the 70s and early 80s. He led them to an undefeated season in 1976. Obviously, completely different, landscape in college football. But yeah, I think you could argue Schiano is the best in terms of modern day and just what he's done, and obviously the regular bowl appearances. And he's made Rutgers relevant. And let's be honest, if he never turned football into what he did his first time, they would never have made the Big-10. So I think
Right.
from that perspective, it also adds a layer of appreciation that fans have for him.
Right. I think that's a great take. And for myself, I was very tuned in, especially after that Michigan State win. I was tuned into Rutgers. And I remember I was tweeting up a storm during the Michigan game. That was one of the most fun games I watched. And I was like an honorary Rutgers fan. I'm not a huge Michigan fan, so I was rooting real hard for the Scarlet Knights that night. But man, I appreciate you joining me. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a chance to plug everything. The website's awesome. I was checking it out. So where can our fans find you, and where can our fans find all your content?
Sure, thanks. And I'll just touch on something you just said. I think fun. That was another takeaway from this season is we had fun again. This team had fun again on the field. Like I said, they had a lot of trick plays, and they just to see the players react in such a positive way and play so hard for him and his staff. Was really refreshing to see and inspiring for the fan base to see that these guys, a lot of the same guys that were just took a beating the previous 2 years. To see them compete the way they did was really, a really great thing to see. So, but yeah, thank you. It's onthebanks.com. We're at OTB underscore SB Nation on Twitter. I'm at Aaron underscore Breitman on Twitter, and yeah, we're credentialed with football, and we'll be on all the calls, and once practice, we can be at practice again, we'll be there. So definitely check us out. But I appreciate the time and everything, and hopefully we'll have more to talk about once the season begins in a positive way.
Absolutely, man. And we'll definitely be reaching back out closer to football season. I'm excited for Rutgers football. I think it's awesome that this team's back on the upswing. I like Greg Schiano as a coach. So I'll be back in touch, man. Guys, go make sure to catch Aaron everywhere. Go check out onthebakes.com. Y'all know where to find us. Our Big 10 and 31 days will continue later this week. But for myself, for Aaron, for the Blue Bloods, we are out.